Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Getting Angry with David talk, right? Hopefully not at David, but we're going to be getting angry here today. So, open source exploitation. It's a really, really, really deliberately combative title, I'm sorry. The truth is I don't have a better title for the talk that works, so I just kind of left it and we're here. It's horrible and it's difficult because all the titles sound so relentlessly negative that I honestly don't want to use them, and I think if I write them down, people won't turn up and see the thing. So I promise this talk isn't about actually being negative, it's a talk about the work that we have to do to kind of be better as an industry and change the way everything works, really. So as someone that doesn't believe in hills or like walking up them or death or dying on them, this is probably the hill I'm going to die on. So what I want to talk about today is how open source has, in the most case, been turned into exploitation by the biggest organizations in the world, how it's used to extricate free labor from all of you, and why this is fundamentally probably a bad thing, actually. I'm going to talk about what we need to do to change this, to make software, and especially open source software, which is something I dearly love and have loved for a very, very long time, actually survive. Now, right now, I honestly think that open source is in the most precarious position it's ever been, which is kind of contrary to what most people would think, looking at all of the popular open source that exists in the world that powers everything. But sometimes everything isn't what it seems. That's me. I appreciate I'm somewhat conspicuous. So I'm the director of architecture for a company called New Day. Wrote a bunch of kids' books, but I think this talk is probably more important than my day job. I don't know if it will resonate, and I don't know if you're going to care by the end of this, but we're going to talk about open source now. Right, so before we get into the gory details, what I really want to talk about is loving things. I know it sounds very meta, but let's talk about how important it is to understand that you can be critical of something because you want it to be better, not because you want to harm it. You can criticize things that you love, and that's okay if it comes from a place of good faith. I've been building open source software since the actual 1990s, like when the internet was a village and it was like 12 people. And the truth is I was tiny. I was a young teenager when I started doing all this stuff. And it's important to understand that in any journey of maturity, the techniques and opinions that take you from A to B are not necessarily the things you need to take you from B to C. People often struggle with the fact that context does change and everything is temporal, so something that did work at one point in time might not be serving us for the best today. And the truth is humans are beautiful, but sometimes kind of simple creatures that often think that because something has worked for them once, it's going to work again and again and again. And sometimes it's important to be critical of that. And as technologists and as an industry, if we have to grow and as our communities grow bigger and involve more people from different points of life and different perspectives, we kind of have to take all that on board. So this is a thing that you'll hear all the time when people talk about open source software, that open source won the fight. We won. You probably kind of all know this to be true now. You probably use Visual Studio Code at the very least as a text editor, or you've probably got it installed. As of 2018, 40% of VMs on Azure were Linux, and the number is a lot higher now. Open source won the hearts and minds of people by telling them that software could and should be free. But people really don't understand what free really means and what the ramifications of free are. So while the GPL and all of its variants were probably not the first permissive and free software licenses, they were the licenses that gained popularity and mindshare because of Linux in the 90s, right? And this is really the origin of where free software came from in popular consciousness. I like to think of kind of Linux as the tip of the spear that pushed open source software into the mainstream. And its GPL license was originally described by the Free Software Foundation as free as in speech, not as in beer. Right? It's a kind of confounding statement that a lot of people struggle to understand, and I've heard lots and lots of people say that over the years who didn't really think about what it meant. So what does it really mean? So the GPL, in simple terms, means that if you use source code available under its license, then you need to make your changes public for other people to use, right? And this is because the Free Software Foundation promoted the concept of software freedoms, literally the right of the software itself to be liberated, the software to be free, so that its users could then modify, inspect, and change it. Like the Free Software Foundation, and I hate to say it's right there in the name, was all about the software itself. And it's kind of a noble goal, which shows its lineage as the license used to build a Unix clone that was supposed to be freely available because the people that were building it at the time were angry that Unix wasn't free and they couldn't use it. But it was a goal that centered around people sharing source code with their peers at local computer clubs, right? Very, very small communities of people sharing. And it's important to stress that free never meant free from cost. And, it's kind of ironic because that's the way most people use the word free. And in fact, much of the original literature talks about this by describing the software as free from cost as being gratis, something you receive for free. Now, this is very common. Like, does free software mean using the GPL? Well, actually, it doesn't. The GPL is just one kind of free software license. And in their own words, they say, they maintain a complete list, and they describe any software that gives the user certain freedoms, classifies as a free software license. And over time, a lot of people have got confused by which licenses kind of count as free software and which don't. But the GPL was proposed as a positive license, mostly because it mandated that people share back improvements of the software to the community. So it maintained that central theme of the software itself being free. They themselves say that you can use more permissive licenses if you don't like that central restriction that they built in by default to protect the software. Now, the irony is it wasn't the GPL that actually won, and it wasn't Linux that really won. Linux was kind of niche in the 90s when I started using it, and it was niche probably until the late 2000s, realistically. It's why we have so many jokes about the year of Linux on the desktop, and it's why Android really was the thing that really made Linux go. But despite that, actually, there are a lot of limited forays into early open source. There were companies like Red Hat, and what they had is they had these strong copyleft licenses. But actually, they were not the pieces of software that succeeded. They were good in data centers. And they're certainly not the reason that ultra megacorps like Microsoft or Amazon or Google now champion open source software. So the widespread adoption of open source software in the enterprise is directly, specifically related to the MIT license and Apache and other slightly more permissive licenses, which don't force people to build on top of software, or that build on top of software to release their changes back. They're free from that constraint, and they don't force people to reshare. They are not free software licenses in the traditional definition. So permissive licensing allows individuals or organizations to take your work, build on top of it, and even operate these modified copies of work for profit. And much like the GPL, the aim of open source was not to restrict commercial use, but to ensure the freedom of the software itself. So here's the unfortunate truth. So who benefits from permissive licensing? Now, it's a bit of a trick question, because in any situation where you have a tragic power imbalance, let's say between maybe the 4 biggest companies in the entire world and you, it's not you. You're not the person that wins. So, the person that's putting the code on the internet, the organization is always the entity that will benefit, always, 100% of the time. So without wanting to sound like a naysayer, open source became popular in enterprise precisely because of permissive licensing. Because enterprise doesn't care about giving anything to anyone for free. It's not how capitalism works. And, like I said before, I deeply love open source, but the combinatorial value that adds to teaching and our peers and others that everyone kind of got into open source for, that's not what enterprise is interested in. Not at all. So I can't say loud enough, multinational organizations don't give a single solitary fuck about you or your values. Sorry. Businesses don't care about you. This is the truth, right? You live long enough and you work for enough companies and you understand that this is just the truth. But you know what they do care about? They care about free value, really care about free value, and they care about free value that they're able to commercially exploit. Very, very simple. So the wide proliferation of software in business is a direct result of licenses like the Apache license and the MIT license that leveraged into closed source, proprietary for-profit software, things that individuals wrote for free. And, let's test this theory. If you ever want to test this theory, go into your office tomorrow and try add some GPL licensed code into your closed source application, and then go to your architecture people or your manager and tell them you did it. See what happens. Right? The truth is it won't work, right? Permissive licenses explicitly and without recourse shift the balance of power towards large technical organizations and away from individual authors and contributors, because the same freedoms that they afford you as an individual, they afford to organizations with the resources and desire to exploit them severely. It's just a fact. They have the might to leverage the code. They have the capability to build upon it, and they have the incentive and organizational structures to profit from doing so in the long term. It's just the truth. Open source software took a hold in the enterprise precisely because it allowed itself to be exploited. I remember first putting this on the internet, and I got that, exploited is a strong word, isn't it? You can't really say it's exploitation. We're not slave driving. Interesting. The action or fact of treating someone unfairly in order to benefit from their work. Oh, God. The action of making use of and benefiting from resources. The fact of making use of a situation to gain an unfair advantage for oneself. Well, I don't know about you, but I am not making Microsoft's market cap or Apple's market cap or Google's or Amazon's. It's just the truth. It's just accurate. It's exploitation. Now, it's funny because you look at it like that and you think, all this software has been made by very, very smart people. Surely we are smarter than to just let ourselves be exploited like this. Everyone has seen this picture at this point, right? This is just the truth. It's widely reported that the vast majority of open source projects aren't funded, even really important ones. There is no art without patronage. None. The only successful open source projects in the world are either A, backed by an enormous company that uses them for strategic marketing and product positioning advantage, or B, rely on the exploitation of free labor for the gain of organizations operating these products for profit. Those are the only two categories of successful open source. And I can see people starting to froth a little bit, but GitHub donations is a thing. What about Patreon? I donated once. Yeah. Cool. Pay your rent, pay your mortgage. And the truth is, when people say things like that to me, I hear them undermining their own arguments, and I hear them undermining themselves. We've all watched people burn out. We've all watched people trying to do, the dual licensing thing, get verbally assaulted by their peers for not being free enough for them. We've watched people go to the effort to set up legal frameworks to sell support contracts and have single-digit instances of those support contracts sold for the most commonly used packages and libraries in the world. It's pretty embarrassing, to be honest. We've seen packages with 20 million plus downloads languish and be abandoned and handed over, precisely because nobody is willing to pay for the work. And when something that is popular gets abandoned, you're then leveraged by supply chain attack potential because someone can take over that package and do bad things with it. It's a hellscape. Victimizes creators, and I would not wish a successful open source project on anybody. I was talking to someone in the bar last night who was just like, when I was young, I tried making a few libraries and they never hit. And I look back now and I think, oh God, I dodged that bullet, right? And I think that's the truth. So obviously I asked Reddit what they thought. I like asking Reddit what they thought because you always get the worst opinions. I made the observation in a Reddit thread recently that it was utterly wild that I could stream myself reading an open source code base on YouTube, and people will happily allow me to profit from it in ad revenue and kind of Twitch tips. But the open source community has become so wrong-headed at the idea that you could charge for the software itself that it becomes anathema that I somehow can profit off it, but no one else is allowed to. So here are the direct quotes that I got. Oh, so you hate GCC and Linux too, since they're developed by and for companies. Well, I don't think I said that. Arguing against free software, what year is it? 2024. If it's free, why wouldn't it be free for everybody? That includes organizations. I'm honestly not clear what you're suggesting specifically and logistically. Well, don't let organizations have it for free. Obviously, I was kind of downvoted to oblivion because people seem to misinterpret, hey, perhaps multinational organizations should pay you for your work, as I don't think software freedom is good. Two very different sentences. So, I was honestly more astonished by people suggesting that charging for software was somehow in contradiction with the ethos of open source. I sat there thinking, God, did you ever actually read the original papers that all the people that formed the Free Software Foundation put out that said, actually, we don't care if you charge for this? Very, very surreal twisting of history. And really, I just think it shows a lack of literacy as to what open source really meant. So let's tell a story. So that's Metallica in their haircuts and bad production era. So Lars Ulrich was right. In 1999, Napster heralded the popularization of peer-to-peer file-sharing networks, and Metallica litigated. And they were absolutely vilified, and if Reddit had been around at the time, Reddit would have downvoted them too. And they really were dragged through hell for saying, maybe file sharing, a bit problematic. So the music business had become this big corporate fat cat. It was nickel and diming everyone with exorbitant CD prices. I remember buying a Metallica album about this time, about £20, right? Like expensive for CDs. Bands were filthy rich, and record executives more so. And everyone cried, oh, well, what do Metallica know about technology? They're rich already, we just want new music. And I know that because that was me. So I spent my entire teenage years pirating music from Napster, Audio Galaxy, Kazaa, Direct Connect hubs. Anything I could steal a song or an album from, I would steal a song or an album. But you know what? If anyone had actually spent time listening to what Lars Ulrich, the drummer from Metallica, actually said when they took Napster to court, they realized he was actually right. So he's been vindicated since then, of course. So I read an interview with him recently where he looks back on this whole thing because they were like, oh, what was it like to become the biggest boogeyman for technology? And he's very, very reflective. And what he actually said at the time was this: we're devaluing the work of musicians. It doesn't affect me at all, but it will affect every band that comes after me. I'm already a multimillionaire. File sharing devalues the work, and once it's done, it can never be undone. Oops. After 1999, the music industry was never the same. Small touring bands that would make comfortable livings scrape by in 2024. Niche and underground genres, while more vibrant than ever, literally cannot financially sustain themselves. It doesn't scale. We devalued the work by giving it all away. You want to be a musician these days? You sell T-shirts for a living. It's fucking depressing. And that's what you get when you give it all away. The only thing that people profit from, the only people are the large organizations that are the Spotifys and the EMIs. Well, EMI got bought, but the big music conglomerates who can gobble up all of the small resources that can't run themselves. For exactly the same reason, in that they have the resource and the will to exploit the value at scale, where you do not. So Spotify today occupies the space where the music labels once did. A vastly profitable, large organization that's ironically in technology that profits while artists starve. Sorry, Lars. Yeah, and I guess this is the real problem, right? This is where we are right now. I wish I had the fine wine and art collection that Lars Ulrich did to get me through the coming storm of the collapse of open source licensing. But forgive me for feeling like I'm standing here desperately hoping that people listen because, I love open source, and just like Lars loved tape trading and the underground and communities, we came up with open source in a world where we were teaching our peers and sharing cool hacks and discs in the 90s and the 80s. But, the truth is, what we love has been weaponized to kind of commit a violence against us. It doesn't put humans or maintainers or creators or authors at its center. Instead, it puts organizational exploitation as its core goal. And we all made a tragic mistake in thinking an ownership model that was good for our local computing scene was going to be good for world scale without change. So how did this happen? Right, obviously, the technology industry is bigger than it's ever been before, but the scary part really is we got here because this is exactly what we wanted. And I did this, and some of you probably did this. We all made the same mistake, right? So I spent about 15 years advocating for the adoption of open source in mid to large size organizations. And I did it because I loved using open source at home and I thought it was really cool. And I myself sat and wrote policies that said, oh, well, we can't adopt GPL things because that means we'd have to give our stuff away. So actually, MIT and permissive licenses are the stuff that we should take. And I wrote it into corporate strategy docs and I suggested it to senior leadership. And I was wrong. I was just wrong. It was the wrong thing to do. And I made a mistake. So I should have spent that time advocating that we licensed dual license software, that we bought the support contracts, that we adopted the GPL software and contributed back to it, that we participated and gave back to the community. That's what I should have been doing for all that time. But I don't think if I'd have been doing that all that time, open source would have ever got the hold in organizations. It's a wonderfully self-defeating cycle. And I was wrong, and I'm sorry, and I feel like I kind of let everyone down. And it wasn't just me. But this is the problem. It wasn't just me, right? Every time a small organization or creator tries to license their software in a way that protects them from the exploitation of big business, Elasticsearch was a really notable example recently, or the Apollo clients, right? Or numerous other examples over the years, the community just savages them, right? Without realizing that the community is just savaging itself. Like you're hitting yourself and your peers for trying to make a living. We need to be better at supporting each other and understanding and knowing when a creator cries burnout that they can't pay rent in Kudos, or that they need to advertise for work in an NPM package install, or recently a .NET mock library install, that they mean it, they can't pay and they're burnt out. It could be you. It might be you. It could be your project in that position, and it's just a dice roll if it is or it isn't. We need new licenses, a new culture that prioritizes the freedom of people from exploitation over the freedom of software. And I think that's the big change that we have to get through in our industry. I want you to get paid. If you take anything away from this talk, I would quite like you to get paid and be able to do the thing you love and eat. I want a world where it's viable to build a small part of something and make a nice little thing that you love and make a living doing it without you having to go to 100 meetings a day or sit in a corporate hierarchy, right? Like, we should be able to do that as people that fundamentally make things. If we have to operate inside this like late-stage capitalist hellhole, I want it to be on our terms. So the problem is this also isn't a single contributor problem in and of itself. So the development community has this wonderfully misaligned idea that you have a trust relationship between things like smaller independent software vendors, ISVs, that gets continually conflated with people's love of free at the point of consumption software. People love their tooling, and you end up thinking that like this is a trust relationship, and that an open source and these vendors suffer from the same outrage as independent maintainers when expectations are not met, or when people think that trust bond is broken. So, for instance, last year it flared up particularly problematically in the tooling space, where, I don't know if anyone suffered this, that like a very, very popular REST API tool, Postman, changed its licensing to become basically untenable for a lot of the users that used it. It was a bad license change, fine. So what happened, like anywhere, is everywhere ran to try and pick up a competing tool, which subsequently changed its licensing to match what Postman had done because they realized that they were about to get bombarded with users that were taking everything for free and not paying. The truth is that both of those tools ended up mandating user logins and shutting down local development modes precisely because they knew it was the only way they could monetize their services going forwards. And it's funny, you look at a tool like Postman, which is a closed source tool, and even they have a marketing web page that they describe as their open source philosophy, which is funny, which is that they're not open source, but they think open source APIs are good. Kind of freedom for thee and not for me, I guess. So the irony is the mere thought of Insomnia, the competing tool, trying to walk towards monetization and sustainability was enough to turn the noses of users to such an extent that they had to walk back their changes. And effectively, the pitchfork-wielding masses turned them back and reverted those changes. And I don't think that was the right decision, truthfully. And it's not just API tooling. A similar predictable pattern has happened with HashiCorp, who make very, very popular infrastructure as code tools. They are the darling of DevOps teams everywhere. And they recently changed their licensing, resulting in forks and a flurry of support from massive companies who were nowhere for years and just relying on their software. And it basically took HashiCorp to say, hey, wait a second. You've been ripping us off for over a decade. Maybe we should get paid. For all of a sudden, a multi-million-dollar funding drive to happen from other people. And that's just gross, to be honest. Really, really gross. The irony is, and I checked this morning, the number of commits to the forks of Terraform that happened in the wake of that is like a handful every week. The original HashiCorp source repository has 10 to 20 a day. You can see where the investment goes when someone actually cares about the product. So these kind of bitter, embattled forks of things, I'm not really sure of the answer we're looking for. So, do we think companies can ever ethically interact with open source? Honestly, I think they can. I think companies really, really can, and I think they have a big role to play here. And there's a little bit of light before I talk about what I think we need to do to readdress this imbalance. So I think there are companies that do really good work in open source who fund it well, and they all have reasons for doing so. I mean, I think HashiCorp are probably a good example of a company that well funds open source. They've made a pretty sustainable business out of it. And even some of the biggest players have reasonably ethical open source products. You have to realize that they do it for marketing. Microsoft are pretty good at this, right? To be honest, they give away a lot of things for free. They've had their moments of crushing small packages underfoot, but generally they do try. And when it's the biggest company in the literal world, I'll take the effort at least because it has some effect. But you realize that you're the product, right? You're getting something for free because it buys you into their ecosystem, and that's the truth. They wouldn't do it otherwise. It's for mindshare. And we're okay to interact with organizations on these terms as long as we understand that that's the trade-off that we're going through. And there's nothing wrong with taking and using software that they make available for free. But remember that your patronage is the product. Simple as that. And even the projects that you may perceive to be independent is, like Linux. Linux is a great example of a project that's paid for basically by Intel, Microsoft, and IBM. Free and independent operating system. Look at the committers, and you will see whether it's really free and independent. The open source software that you produce is not the same kind of open source software as these things, though. And it probably never will be, and that's probably a good thing. So how can we change this status quo? What can we do to make this better? Now, I think we need both better approaches and better systems, along with the cooperation of all of the major vendors to really make a dent in this problem. And it's not going to be easy, but I think there's a little bit of a role for it in all of us. Now, firstly, this is the obviously blinding thing, is we really need to support creators in our communities. And it's the easiest thing that you can all do because, it's the most free way we can solve the problem. The next time each of you is about to send that shitty tweet because Docker Desktop made delaying of updates a paid user feature, perhaps, just for a second, think that you could put your credit card in there and shut up. Would be better for everybody. The next time you see a library you like adopting an open core model where they give away the free bit but all the business features are on the side, go and advocate that you buy those extra features because actually that's what you need. Don't spend all the time building them and hacking them on yourself. Support the people doing the work. Whenever a maintainer asks for support or contributions on something you use, try. You might not be an expert, but you can try and help. So I think you should, not be entitled. Don't shout down your peers. Don't troll them for trying to make a living. If we all behaved better with a bit more kindness and empathy to the people doing the work, the whole industry would be a much kinder place for everybody, I think. Now, here's the thing. I think we need to kind of rehabilitate package management a little bit. I think this is our thin end of the wedge. I think it's table stakes for the next iteration of programming environments and ecosystems to support billing as a core feature in package management. I think we can change this, and I think this is where the vendors and the tool builders have a real role of responsibility to make everything better. I would move to a platform that put creator sustainability at its heart at a moment's notice, even if I liked the languages less, even if I liked the ecosystem less. I kind of have a theory that more organizations would actually pay for the software that they used if there are existing and trivial models that supported or allowed it, right? Most projects probably couldn't issue an invoice or fill in your supplier assurance forms or pay taxes or accept credit cards if they tried. And I think actually people like Microsoft, who if you shine a light on them, own most of the big package management distribution platforms in the industry. They could do this. They could build these features. And our next generations of platforms need to support this for sustainability of creators. And we're seeing a few steps towards this with like nascent projects like SDK bin, which is like a NuGet, but with billing added on the side. I think we also need to petition all the main platform vendors. So by that, I mean AWS, I mean GCP, I mean Azure. For a step up, I want to pay for these libraries in my Azure bill. I want to pay per download, I want to pay per usage. I want it in my GCP bill. I was talking to, in fact, Dylan, who was on stage before me, and he said he ran the numbers that if around the time the kerfuffle happened with Mock, that if every package on NuGet had the Spotify pricing model applied to it, and bear in mind, Spotify has a notoriously terrible remuneration model, like bottom of the business for this stuff. Your medium-sized packages would make about 60 grand a year. That's like a job. That's an actual job. People can live off that. So I think we should get the vendors to put this in the bills, right? I've complained about large organizations leveraging open source throughout this whole talk. But I think, large organizations aren't fundamentally bad. They're amoral, and they follow the money, and they follow what people want. So I think they kind of operate in their best interest, and their best interest when they're building a platform is user adoption, right? So if everyone says, hey, I want to sell my software and bill it through you, if you can do this for managed services that resell your resources, why can't you do it for packages that also use your services? I think they could do this. I think they could then meaningfully contribute back to the community, and it would unlock a whole category of software sales techniques that just didn't exist until now. Imagine that instead of trying to work through some asinine procurement process, you could just add a NuGet or an NPM or a cargo package, and it just be accounted for and charged at your enterprise level, and you never have to think about it again. I think actually that's a great place that we could get to. I think the best thing a vendor could do is support creators in this way. They could make a real marketplace, and it would be sustainable for people inside of it. So I think we also need to keep fighting for free software, like the original non-commercialized version of free software, if we really care about it. Like we care about free software for users, for teachers, for your friends, for your peers, for the people you meet on the internet, for the fun projects that you do. Like we need to double down on that original ethos. I love open source dearly, and I want it to survive, but we have to understand that what got it to this place of success is something that is currently threatening its sustainable existence. It doesn't have to be a proxy for exploitation. It can be ethical. We can all survive this. I don't want to take your source code away from you. I just desperately want you to have enough people critically think about it that the next time that you go to put a package out, maybe you pick up one of those dual licenses and basically write the license that says, if you make more than $1 million, you got to pay. Seems fair, right? Like, that seems fair. I think we can do that. And I want us to support the scene. So in music, there's the idea of supporting the scene and kind of the heritage and of the work, the shared place where the art comes from. And I think, for me, this is our culture. This is our work. If you'd have gone to art school and you'd done paintings, that would be the work. But this code is our work collectively. So please pay your friends for their software and accept it gracefully if they want to give it you for free, right? Gracefully. Don't expect more from them than you should. So I've done this talk a couple of times, and over the past couple of years, people keep on talking about charity. So I want to touch on this point a little bit. So as this problem has become more and more apparent, we've seen a bunch of alternative fundraising approaches start to appear. We've seen people crowdfund projects on Kickstarter to medium and mixed success. We've seen people operate Patreons, whoever knows how to pronounce that word, for things like early access to source code or early access to binaries. And we've seen GitHub, somewhat cynically, I suppose, introduce sponsorship and a load of examples of companies notably occasionally throwing 10 grand at a project. And, I'll be honest, I feel really conflicted by all of that. Now, a long time ago, I worked in the third sector in the UK, the charities market. And at the end of my tenure there, I was left feeling like excellent charity is not an excuse for a poor welfare state. And I think this is exactly that problem, right? So I applaud creators who are kind of trying to make these grassroots funding movements for their own software. And, they're almost uniformly effectively charging for licenses without using the language of licensing so it doesn't scare people. But, Patreon is probably the thinner end of the wedge that readdresses these problems. Like I've seen a lot of people where maybe you subscribe to the Patreon and you get binaries, otherwise you work the source out for yourself, right? And I think maybe there's a model in there that could work, right? People that just want to take it can take it. I'm not sure that really defends us from Amazon coming and deciding they want to operate your stuff as a service, though, because I'm fairly certain Amazon can pay the $5 a month to get your source code. And, frankly, with all respect to Microsoft, GitHub sponsorships are like literally the absolute least they could possibly do. Like I'm glad that the feature is there. But whenever I see a big company, you'll see like, Microsoft have decided to anoint this one package this month with a $10,000 bounty. You're like, and what percentage of your income is that, Microsoft? I always just feel like it's just one person in the company who's got access to a budget somewhere thinking, I'm going to do a solid to this person. And like, cool, some money is better than no money, but like philosophically it sucks. So I think it's very, very illuminating that I have heard, allegedly, that the early versions of NuGet included billing, and it was stripped out. We need more than charity to fix this, is the truth. So I just want to say thanks for listening, because I think the more that we talk about this stuff, the more that you can be the advocates for paying for the software that your commercial products are built on and optimizing them for the community, than no one, right? You all have the voice in this. So please be angry. Ideally not at me. Thank you for coming. Dare I ask if anyone has any questions? Feels like a gauntlet. Please.
You suggest the idea of paying for packages through the package manager.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that also, you would expect them to have some quality of service,
Yes.
delivery, and I don't think, if there's a single contributor, they can necessarily do that.
So one of the interesting thoughts I had when thinking about the Patreon model was that, kind of along that lines, I think there's a little bit of toxicity baked into it, because people kind of expect this parasocial level of access to the human behind the thing rather than the service. And I think we have to be very, very careful how we walk that path. I think as far as quality of service goes, I mean, we can license around this, right? My gut says, if you're happy stealing my stuff, then be happy paying for the stuff you're stealing, right? You still have the source, you can still fix it. Whether businesses and their legal departments would smile upon that, I don't know. We've all met legal departments. It's complicated. Please.
So what would be the best thing to do right now to support as as individuals.
As individuals.
Yeah, I have done, for instance, in Open Collective, GitHub, a couple of
Yeah.
other ones.
And I love that. I love you for that, legitimately. Like, I really respect everyone that has like gone, oh, this kind of sucks, we should do something about it. I think the biggest thing that you can do is influence the companies that you work at to buy support licenses from small organizations that form around supporting open source libraries. That's the thing you can do if you don't work for Microsoft or Google. You can say, hey, I get value from this. How about we pay for the value that I get? I think that is what I would change, and that's what I am changing about my own behaviors.
Back to the paying through packaging. If you're doing that, you're basically setting up these pretty big companies as a bit of an app store. Are they going to be charging 30-50% on it? If they start charging not, or start without it, are they not going to change that probably at some point?
I imagine they will. But frankly, I think if they kowtow to the peer pressure of allowing us to bill at all, I think the precise cut, and I think it's reasonable for them to take a cut for the value they add to that thing. Like, I think as responsible custodians, we can accept that. I mean, it feels bad saying sympathize with Microsoft and the bills that they have to pay. But I feel like, it's fair to suggest that it has a cost, otherwise they'll shut it down, and companies do behave like that. I think a cut is fine, as long as it's reasonable.
As long as it's proportional.
Yeah.
But to go back and link back to the music industry, honesty in royalties is a problem.
Yeah, and you are right. And I guess the nice thing about the existing technology around packaging is we can see the numbers.
But if they're going through their own platforms and they fudge them,
They could fudge them. Yep.
because they might be coming from their
And the alternative, if we start pulling that thread, is we set up community-driven package sources that we then form companies around, and then you have to audit the companies, and it's like, oh, cool, same problem. Maybe it would be better. And I think that's when we talk about things like SDK bin, I think that's the mental model of like, hey, actually, an independent company doing this might be better positioned to not lie to you. But we have contracts and maybe class action lawsuits if we're American. Please.
If we change this to a system where they get compensated and stuff for their work, which is good, aren't you worried though that if we create a commercial interest in open source, that would attract people with commercial interest rather than people with philosophical interest, and change the scene?
So the question was, do we think it changes the scene if we kind of put commercialized wrappers around open source because it will attract people that have commercial interests and it might change the culture? Culture is what we do and how we behave. That's the thing that culture is. My honest feeling is those people are already here. The sharks are already in the tank. I think all we're doing is we're saying there's a shark. If we change the culture around it and becoming more aware of it. Like, I like to think by giving things language, at least we can identify and protect ourselves from bad actors. It's difficult, again, and all of this is difficult. And if I had an easy answer, I'd be making money off open source. I think that's everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Please do what we can. Please.